welcome to the morbid basement, where the shadows beckon. Today's story is about how a seemingly innocent inheritance turned into a living nightmare. And trust me, it takes a turn you won't see coming. My granddad and I were always close. He was the rock of our family, always there with sage advice and guidance through all of life's challenges. We spent countless weekends together, just chatting about life. He'd tell me stories about the good old days, and I'd fill him in on how things were going in my life. But there was one story he never told me, and I only discovered it after he passed away. When he died, I was devastated. I felt like I'd lost my best friend. A few weeks after the funeral, the family lawyer called me in for a meeting. I thought it was just about sorting out his will. But then, he handed me an old, rusty key. "Your granddad left you a holiday cabin," he said. I had no idea he even owned a cabin. He gave me directions and a note from Grandad saying it was a special place he wanted me to have. Intrigued, I decided to check it out. The cabin was deep in the woods, far from any main roads. It took me hours to find it. When I finally arrived, it looked like something out of a storybook, quaint with ivy climbing the walls and a little porch out front. Despite its charm, there was something oddly unsettling about it, but I shrugged it off, attributing it to my grief and the strangeness of the situation. On the first night, I tried to make myself at home. I lit a fire in the old stone fireplace and cooked a simple dinner. As I sat there, listening to the crackling flames, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It was probably just the wind, I told myself, or maybe animals outside. But as the night wore on, the sounds grew stranger. It started with rustling in the trees, then the occasional snap of a twig. I tried to sleep, but every noise jolted me awake. Still, I convinced myself it was just my imagination. The second night was when things started getting really eerie. After a long day of exploring the woods and tidying up the cabin, I settled in for the night. As I lay in bed, I heard a soft tapping on the window. At first, I thought it was a branch swaying in the wind, but the tapping was rhythmic, almost deliberate. My heart began to race. I crept to the window and peeked through the curtains. Nothing. Just darkness and the outline of trees. I went back to bed, but the tapping continued, more insistent this time. I couldn't sleep, so I sat up, staring at the window until the tapping finally stopped just before dawn. By the third night, I was exhausted, but determined to stay. I needed to understand why Grandad had left me this place. I felt a strange connection to it, like it held answers I needed to find. But that night, as I sat reading by the fire, the tapping started again, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside. My heart pounded as I crept to the window. Through the gap in the curtains, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the tree line. It was a tall, gangly figure, and its limbs seemed too long and almost twisted. Its movements were jerky, almost unnatural. I stumbled back as it turned to face me, my mind racing. Was this some sort of prank? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I stumbled over myself as I locked the front door, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the old rusty latch. I quickly moved to each window, checking the locks and pulling the curtains tight. The footsteps outside grew louder, now circling the cabin. Panic set in. I grabbed a kitchen knife, feeling its weight in my hand, hoping it would offer some protection. I backed upstairs into the bedroom, my eyes darting around, looking for any sign of movement. As I locked the bedroom door, I felt my heart sink as I realized I had forgotten to lock the back door. The footsteps were now inside the house. I gripped the knife hard and listened carefully. The footfalls were now coming upstairs. My heart racing, I slid under the bed, clutching the knife, my body shaking with terror. I tried to control my breathing, to stay quiet, but my heart was pounding so loud, I was sure it could be heard outside. Then, the impossible happened. I heard footsteps inside the room. The door hadn't opened, but something was in there with me. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving closer to the bed. I could see its feet, pale, bony, and twisted, like something out of a nightmare. My mind raced with terror. I prayed it wouldn't kneel and look under the bed. I wouldn't have been able to handle that, and I'm not sure what I would have done if it did. The footsteps paused, just inches from my face. I could see its gnarled toes curling against the floorboards. It stayed there for what felt like an eternity, and then suddenly, the lights went out. I was overcome with terror. My breath was caught in my throat as I waited for it to get me. But then I heard the footsteps slowly move across the room, and then the closet door open, and then close. Had it gone into the closet? I stayed under the bed, paralyzed with fear for hours. The house was silent again, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I stayed under that bed for so long, the sun was just starting to rise. When I finally did, it was painfully slow. I crawled out from under the bed, every muscle in my body screaming in tension. I considered peeking into the closet to see if it was still there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I quietly left the bedroom, moving through the cabin as silently as possible. I didn't stop to gather anything. I just left, pulling the front door closed behind me, with the utmost care not to make a sound. Once outside, I bolted to the car, my heart racing, and drove away without looking back. I never went back to that cabin again. I eventually decided to sell it, but I could never bring myself to talk about what had happened. I simply attached a note with the key reading, "Do not look in the closet." Thanks for visiting the Morbin Basement. If you found today's story gripping, don't forget to like, share, and follow for more spine-chilling content, if you dare.